Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan podcast, where every journey is worth living. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm your host for today's episode. I'm a bilingual neurolinguistic programming and cognitive behavior psychotherapist specializing in anger management issues, both court-appointed and private, marriage counseling using the EFT method, dissociative disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, depression, anxiety, dream analysis, and also provide life, business, and retirement coaching support. I provide individual one-on-one session in both French or English and also do group settings. If you need any assistance, reach out to DMV Therapy and Coaching Services at 301-325-1550, and our website can be found at lifecoachdanamzalai.com. Today, I'm very excited to have for our second episode of season 19, a very special guest and survivor of the most severe spectrum of narcissistic disorder, Dana Diaz. And just like every of my past episode, I will leave it up to the guests to probably introduce themselves, and no one can do a better job. Dana, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Dana Diaz. I am the author of Gasping for Air, The Stranglehold of Narcissistic Abuse, which actually resulted from my lifelong experience with narcissistic abuse. The book itself was an elaboration of a journal that I kept of the things that were happening and being said, because I was being told that I was delusional and none of that stuff happened and none of that was said. So when I realized that this was actually something that other people were experiencing as well, I felt a responsibility to share my experiences, just to let other people know that they're not alone and that they're not crazy, and that this really is, I hate to say, but it's becoming an epidemic. So thank you for having me on to talk about this.
Absolutely, Dana. It's a pleasure to have you, especially this when it comes to happiness. We want everyone to be able to kind of be not just open-minded, but awakened by what's going on out there and not feel guilty that they are kind of, that either they feel rejected by the person that they're with,
Right.
or especially being gaslighted, in which I know that you know that term very, very well,
Yes.
because this is the special skill of narcissistic people. But then again, when you came up with meeting your husband, were there any red flags in the beginning?
Oh,
Or
yes.
an expert of hiding that until you signed the marriage certificate?
No, he didn't. And I think that's the thing that baffles me about myself. But the beautiful thing about being a writer is that there's a lot of self-discovery and understanding about the other person as well, and the different dynamics of relationships when you're looking at it on paper versus living it. So while I was writing my book, I realized that, the signs had been there from day one. The second that I met him, he reminded me of my abusive, narcissistic stepfather, who I had just escaped the home of. So it should have caused all these, red alarms, red alerts, but it also makes sense to me why I fell for that same very familiar personality, not just because of the familiarity, but because growing up in a home where I was physically and verbally abused by and overpowered and dominated by a narcissist, I had learned that love had to be learned or earned. I'm sorry. So I was people pleasing. I was a codependent. I just wanted everyone to like me, and I was starving for love, because even my mother was very neglectful, very distant, because I was a teenage pregnancy that she hadn't expected nor wanted. So, I was just starving for any little crumbs, anything anybody would give me. So it was sort of creating this perfect storm to be with a narcissist who expected servitude and exaltation, because of course I admired him, I praised him, I would do anything so that he would be happy with me. And that's how we fell into that.
So do you feel that you were looking for a father figure, Dana? And that's why you kind of like created this similarity between your stepfather, in which it was an environment that you were so used to, and you wanted to continue on with that same environment, but you tried to escape from the environment. So that should have been quite conclusive not to want to be again in that same
Right. I could definitely see that, because I admit I have daddy issues. I could see that, but with my ex-husband, I do believe he never he never presented in a fatherly way where I felt like I was trying to replace that. I think it was more just the personality, the arrogance, the sense of entitlement. He was very aloof and just diminished me and didn't recognize my potential or even recognize my sense of myself to have an opinion and my own thought and everything that makes a person who they are. Now I will admit this because I'm nothing if not honest. I am remarried to a longtime friend. He is significantly older. And I mean, I joke about it all the time. I even jokingly call him daddy because he is very fatherly. He's like the father everybody wants. And he's sort of fatherly to me. But you know what? We have a very loving and healthy and wonderful marriage. And it's what I need. And so I'm not ashamed of that. But I could absolutely see with my current husband that daddy factor is definitely playing into it. But he's a hot dad. He's a good guy.
I'm sure a lot of people can relate. So let's just try to go back into the past when it comes
of course.
Understanding, and for especially those who are listening to this podcast, I'm sure that many are experiencing some similar behaviors when it comes to their significant other. But is it because you being an empath and you being with someone who's narcissistic, you're always going to try to find excuses for their behaviors?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's who I am because of where I came from, or if it's a learned behavior from my mother, because my mother was the enabler. My mother was the one who turned her head. Something could be said or done 2 feet away from her, and I would go to her and say, "Did you just see that? Did you just hear that?" And I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, she literally, it's like she was deluding herself because she was avoiding responsibility to take action against it. She didn't want to do that. To this day, she chooses to be with that man because she actually told me before we became estranged, she likes her life. And I impede that because I defend myself and I stand up for what's right versus what's wrong. She doesn't want to do that. She is very submissive in that way and chooses to be. I could not be forced into that same submission. So that became a problem. And that's why I was singled out, and obviously physical threat was used and everything else. So there's a lot there to unravel. But, I think that's the thing about our journey in our life, is that if you can hold on to that sense of who you are and what you want. I don't judge my mother for making the choice she made. Do I think it's right to eliminate your daughter from your life because you like having your big house and your nice things and you think you can't have it without the man you're married to? No, I don't agree with it. But I think the beauty of life is that we all have choices. And if we are living the life that we want to live, that's when we will find that happiness. That's when you have to live in your authentic way. I mean, there's no other way to say it in order for you to feel settled, because I think it's any unrest like what I felt living in their home that's I was never at peace. I was never settled. I was always conflicted and always very hyper vigilant. And that's where this answers your question. I was very hyper vigilant always, and I still to this day survey a room when I walk in. I am feeling energies. I'm not sure about this one. I'm looking at that one, fidget. I'm looking at the eye movements over there, the body language. I have to assess if there's any threats or who might be a potential threat to me, who I feel comfortable with, who I feel safe with. And oftentimes, especially in groups of large people, I get very overwhelmed. And I mean, I will sweat profusely and start to feel a little panic. I am now healed enough that I can keep my emotions regulated, but sometimes I just don't wanna, and I have to remove myself. And that's absolutely what I had to do in my childhood, because when you're a kid, you don't have a job, you don't have a place to go. Even if you have a place to go, you have legal guardianship over you, so you can't just walk out. But unfortunately, when I entered into my relationship with my ex-husband and proceeded to marry him, even though I always knew it wasn't the right fit, I ended up doing what my mother did. I enabled. I excused. Oh, maybe he had a bad day. Maybe I shouldn't have provoked him. I should watch what I'm doing more, and he was also feeding into that. I mean, I still have, and it's even in my book, and it's only one, there were multiple times that he actually made lists of how to be a good wife. And he would write down specific things that I was to do. And there were rules that were unspoken and spoken. And sometimes they changed on a whim if it suited whatever his mood was at the time. But I knew what parameters I had to stay in to make sure he was pleased. And I guess in a way, I chose to submit like my mother did, because at that point I was so overwhelmed with all the, narcissistic abuse is comprised of multiple abuses. And so it's like bullets coming at you, and you just don't know, you can't even process one situation before another one's happening. So, you have this confusion, you're overwhelmed, you're anxious, you're being told your reality is not what it is. You just want peace. You just want a sense of peace. So yeah, I submitted. I waved the red flag. I followed the rules as best as I could. I tried not to speak out of turn. I tried to look like how he wanted me to look. I did everything. I tried to do everything, unless it was something that absolutely crossed the line, because there were some instances of domestic violence, which took it along, to the more severe extreme of narcissistic abuse. But, in those situations, I had to stand my ground and stand up for myself and for my son, because, we had a child in the midst of all this who didn't experience the slightest of what I did. And he doesn't even know most of the things that occurred between me and his dad. But that's because I tried to prevent him from seeing and knowing and witnessing. Could I prevent the tension and the hostility and not everything? I mean, of course, kids see and hear much more than we realize they do. But, for me, the submission and I guess repeating the cycle as a choice was part of just trying to maintain some sense of normalcy and balance for the two of us.
I see. Now, were you the only sibling living in the house? I mean, when
in my childhood, no, well, for 14 years I was. My mother, I was a teenage pregnancy, and I will very confidently say I don't think she ever wanted children, because immediately after I was born, she had her tubes tied so that she couldn't have children again. But when she married this man that she married, it was a very prevalent theme in my childhood that I was not his biological daughter. Therefore, it was sort of offensive to him that he even had to deal with me. He didn't like having to pay for me. He said he shouldn't have to. He shouldn't have to shelter, clothe, and feed me. He wanted his own child. So they went through years of my mother having procedures to reverse the tubal ligation. And she did become pregnant, I believe 16 times total, until she finally carried my brother to full term, at which point my stepfather told me that I was officially not part of their family. It was the three of them, and I was just there, and that was that.
Wow. Okay. So, but the son or his son, biological son,
Yes.
he never experienced this narcissistic.
Oh, no, this was the epitome of the golden child and scapegoat situation. I can honestly say I was a good kid, smart as a whip. I always tested very high. They actually wanted to move me up 2 grades. I played viola in 2 symphonic orchestras, always on honor roll, taught myself piano, was composing my own music, but nothing I ever did, nothing was good enough but he could sound out a word at 4 years old and it's like, let's have fireworks and a parade, so, and this carries into adulthood. It's just unfortunate that if you ask him about his experience, he thinks he has the best parents that ever could be. And in my situation, I'm like, I don't even have parents because they don't even have anything to do with me. And I'm finally accepting of that, because I think that no matter if somebody's biologically related or not, we talk about happiness. I think to be happy in life, it's unfortunate, but sometimes you have to choose the people that you do allow to have access to you. And the effect that my mother and stepfather, and obviously my ex-husband, have had on me, not just mentally, but I have had physical effects, through abnormally high levels of cortisol, the stress hormone. I've become autoimmune and developed a lung disease, which is why you hear the scratchiness in my throat. That's because of everything I've endured from these people. So it's just not, it's not something that I want to enter into. I don't want to interact with them any more than they want to interact with me. So it's fine. I have people in my life that love me, that have no obligation to, and that's even better than having a mother or a brother or anybody else that, is required to tolerate me just because I'm family. So
your brother from your mom's, with your
yes.
Are you in contact with him? Are you like interacting with him, or he basically?
It has dissipated. We were going okay. I mean, I will say this, he's very mature. So he was able for a very long time to separate that relationship, meaning we had a very good relationship between the two of us, and his relationship with his parents was separate from that. And he understood that the two just could not cross over. It's just unfortunate that, it's a typical narcissistic move, but, they seek to keep children separated. They don't want him to have a relationship with me, and they have been, even though we have no contact between us, my mother and stepfather have been very effective in making sure to tell people things about me that have no truthful basis, but which people believe nonetheless, because why would you not believe the parents of a girl who are saying this and that? So I have lost most of my family, both sides. I feel like I have lost my brother, and it's devastating, but I've also learned through lifelong abuse and now being out of it that it's okay. It doesn't invalidate who I am. It doesn't make me any less of a person. I lived most of my life with a very low self-esteem because of how I was made to feel, but seeing that other people see value in me and see worth in me and see the love in my heart without telling me how to be or what to do, or even acknowledging that I'm not perfect and I have weaknesses and I'm okay with that. It's okay. It's unfortunate, but it's okay.
So how do you do the co-parenting? And I know a lot of people who divorce a narcissistic person be very, very, I would say, difficult, challenging to be able to do. So does he have shared custody, or you have primary custody and he only has visiting rights? How does that work?
Well, I was very fortunate that my son was 17 when I filed for divorce and when we divorced. So I asked him several times just to make sure if he wanted to stay with me, go with his dad, or do the half here, half there. And my son was very firm every time that he wanted to stay with me. Does he want his dad's approval? Of course he does. What child doesn't? I'm going to be 48 this month. I still, even though I'm estranged from my mother and stepfather, of course I want their approval. But I just respect that. But he wanted to stay with me because I've been the consistent, stable parent who has, provided for him and been there for him emotionally and every other way, that he needs a parent to be. Whereas, his dad not just being abusive and being a narcissist, relies on alcohol a lot, and his behavior can be very erratic and just very unpredictable. And children sense that. So I don't look at it as having won anything. I mean, certainly my son will defend his father and carries a relationship with him, but he's old enough that I respect that, and I allow him to, I mean, he is old enough to make his own decisions. So the co-parenting, I guess I got off the hook a little bit because, there's nothing I can do, even though he was technically a minor. I mean, he could drive. He had his own vehicle. I couldn't say, no, you can't this, or no, you can't that. He wasn't 5. So I got off a little easy. And once he was 18 and graduated from high school, he went off to school anyway, to further his education. So it's been pretty easy. No contact. I mean, I can't have contact. He still has found ways to communicate, whether it's through an email or through third party. And this is my ex I'm referring to, but it's just better not to respond. There's nothing productive or purposeful in it.
Did he try to bring your name to the mud when there was a divorce, when you filed for divorce, to say that you're the one who caused
yeah,
the ties of the relationship, etc.? Or what was his approach? Because I'm sure that a lot of people try to separate themselves from their spouse who is narcissistic, but because they fear the repercussion of the divorce, that they hesitate, or they stay longer in the miserable marriage versus taking action and leaving.
Yes, absolutely. He actually started creating a narrative about me among his family, and even to my own mother, of all people, and within our community. I hate to say, about 13 years before our actual divorce. I just had no idea until about the time of the divorce. And the irony is that the way he felt once I had made a decision firmly, because there were a lot of points where I had decided I'm done, I'm filing for divorce. I didn't say that to him. I just knew in my heart I couldn't do it anymore, but then I did. But the final time where I knew this is it, I am going to file for divorce, he sensed a change in me. I think he sensed that I finally had self-respect, and that I meant what I said. I was setting boundaries. I was not tolerating things that I had tolerated. I was finally standing up for myself and declaring what was right for me, and that I wasn't going to accept anything less than that. He sensed the change, and within a few months, it was funny to me after the fact. I came home from work one day. I had not